I'm Ariana Grande.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Erivo.
And you're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Visit bpm.fm to discover more.
Hi, I'm Jack Viertel, and you're listening to the Theater Podcast with Alan Eel.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Theater Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Seals, and today's guest is one of those rare people whose influence on Broadway is so deep and far-reaching that most audiences don't even realize how much of what they love exists because of this person, Jack Viertel. And for decades, he's been the guiding hand behind shows that redefined the art form, helped shape the theatrical landscape in ways that still ripple across the industry today, and has left his fingerprints all over Broadway. And he's also an author with a brand new crime thriller out now called The Glass Eel, which sounds incredibly interesting. But a quick heads up, we go into a full deep dive about how Broadway works, how it could work better, and why some things may, unfortunately, never change. So buckle up, pour yourself something strong of any beverage of choice, because this is one of those conversations that pulls back the curtain in a way you don't often get to hear. Find me online on social media. You can watch the video version of this episode on Spotify or Patreon as always. And now everybody, please enjoy this episode with Jack Viertel. Today's guest is someone whose fingerprints are all over Broadway history and has most likely influenced you in a way that you have never even realized. For decades, he was the senior vice president and creative director at Jujamcyn Theaters, shepherding shows like Into the Woods and Butterfly, Angels in America, The Producers, Book of Mormon, Dear Evan Hansen, so many more, all the way to the Broadway stage. And he's been a dramaturg, a conceiver, a producer, and has been helping shape the theatrical landscape in ways that we will never fully realize. But there's more. His creative reach doesn't stop there. He's got a brand new crime thriller. He's also an author. This crime thriller is out right now called The Glass Eel, a story that's been described as Breaking Bad on the coast of Maine. I just want to dive into this. Holy crap. Jack Viertel, welcome to the Theater Podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So you're involved in Broadway in ways that I think so many people will never even fully realize. I said this multiple times in the intro. I'm going to come back to this, but I want to dive into the author part of your life, because obviously you've got this new book that just came out today as we're releasing this episode called The Glass Eel, which you happen to co-write with your son, Josh, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
And so where did the author side of life come into all of this? And then why add on the additional burden? Is it a burden or a pleasure of working with with a co-author that you happen to be related to?
In this case, where it's my son, it's been purely a pleasure.
Oh,
I can imagine it being a burden in other circumstances. This book happened because I always sort of thought I would be an author of some kind. And then in 2016, I had a book, a nonfiction book called The Secret Life of the American Musical that was published, which is still very much in print, I'm happy to say. And then a novel, like a year and a half or 2 years ago, called Broadway Melody. And my son, who is not a professional writer, he has written columns for The Atlantic online, but he basically is a farmer and an environmental activist, said to me, I have an idea for a thriller, and I think it'd be great on Netflix. And I said, well, I have no idea how to get to Netflix. I mean, and you have no idea how to get to Netflix, but I have written books, and maybe we should see if we can write it as a book. And it really was a wonderful idea. And it was set on the coast of Maine, where I live almost half the year. So I understood a lot about the characters and the mood and the visual side of things. He understood this story that he had come up with, or half come up with. And we went to work together, and it was great fun. He has an enormous amount of environmental information and advocacy attitude. And I like people and how they talk, and based on where they are. And we both love thrillers. And so we just did it. I don't know how we did. We did it mostly in Szechuan restaurants.
Okay. Well, the story has been described, let's see, as Breaking Bad on the coast of Maine, but instead of blue crystal meth, it's baby eels at the center of the drama. It's a dark, suspenseful, thrilling thriller. And I guess the baby eels part of this, is this real? Is this a real
Yes.
thing people are like growing and selling on the black market?
that is one of the things in the book that actually is real. Although, like with most thrillers, there's a lot of stretching of a lot of other things. But yes, there is a big black market in elvers, which are baby little glass eels that you can actually see right through. They're about 3 inches long. They fetch about $2,000 a pound, and there's a legal elvers market, but it's very heavily regulated by the state. So naturally, there's a black market.
Wow.
What the black market does and what the legal market does is that they capture these eels who come into creeks. They're actually born in the Sargasso Sea, which is way the hell and gone down south and east of here, in between, Florida and Africa, someplace. And they're trapped and then sold to aggregators and then shipped to Asia, where they're grown up into full-sized eels and eventually turned into unagi for sushi. So if you've ever had a piece of unagi, avocado roll, whatever, you're as my son says, you're complicit in this market somehow or other. And people do dangerous things to get their hands on these guys.
So why did this get turned into a book? I guess your son.
Well, it didn't seem like a musical.
To make,
if you want to know the truth.
What's that?
I said it didn't seem like a musical.
Well, that was one of my questions. Like, when is this going to get turned into a musical? That's for sure.
Yeah.
But, like, your son being a farmer and an environmentalist, and a bit of an activist too, right? Like, why not take this story and or take this situation and I mean, I guess maybe he is, or you are. Is there something more beyond the story just than like bringing awareness to this kind of trade?
Well, there's a fair amount of nonfiction study of this. I mean, if you look at our website, which is jjviertel.com, you'll see references. You can link to articles about the actual glass eel trade and the fact that they're an environmentally challenged species. But we wanted to have fun and write a thriller, and this was such an obscure, odd thing. It's not. So many thrillers are about drugs or about sex. We wanted to do one that was about something that we thought no one's ever going to write a thriller about this, so we will.
That could be the sequel. It's the druggy sex version of Baby
Right,
Eels,
exactly,
the story.
yes.
Yeah, and that is what gets turned into a musical. Drugs,
Right.
sex, and
There you go.
Baby Eels, the musical.
Yeah.
Right? It's a rock and roll opera thriller.
I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then, all right. Getting into the Broadway stuff, just rewind like a couple decades. Tell me about when you were a kid. What got you into being interested in theater, performing arts? What did you originally want to do when you were little?
Well, it was one very simple act of criminal insanity, which was that my parents and my grandmother took me to see Mary Martin and Peter Pan right before my 6th birthday. And at the end of that performance, I knew I wanted to be in the theater and that I didn't want to do anything else. And I really have almost completely stuck to that idea, with the exception of a couple of years in the early 70s when I thought maybe I wanted to be a screenwriter, which was a really stupid mistake. I fell in love with the theater. I fell completely in love with the theater. And I remember so much about that performance. But oddly, one of the things I remember about it, I said, not quite 6 years old. We sat in the front row. We were A1 and 3 or double A1 and 3 at the Winter Garden, looking down into the pit and seeing all these shiny brass instruments that played music, and I fell in love with the thing probably halfway through the overture, if there even is an overture to Peter Pan. I'm not sure there is one. But anyway, that was it. And then my parents were very much theater people. My father's father actually built 2 Broadway theaters as a contractor, not as a theater owner, and briefly became a theater owner during the Great Depression when someone defaulted on him. My father wrote a play that was produced on Broadway in 1937 and ran for 2 weeks. And then he retreated into the building business with his father. And, they went to the theater all the time. They took me to the theater all the time. And when I was 13, they said, you can go by yourself. We lived in Stamford, Connecticut, which is an hour-long train ride. And in those days, the city was not particularly dangerous or anything. They just said, be home, go in on Saturday, see a matinee, be back before dinner.
Wow.
And so I did every Saturday. Beginning at 62, I was 13 years old. Yeah. I can tell you a lot about the 1962 season.
That's crazy. And do you think that sort of like unsupervised, not unsupervised in a bad way, just the ability to like be independent and find out who you are and what you want to do, like being able to go like on a train ride into a major city when you're 13 and see these incredible shows, like, do you feel like that sort of shaped who you became as a teenager into a young adult? Because you were just like, did you build any confidence doing this, or was it just already kind of who you are?
Because I've always wanted to spend a lot of time by myself, uninterrupted. A lot of my life goes on inside my head. And so getting on a train and going in and I never had a ticket when I got on the train. I had a train ticket, but I never had a theater ticket. Wandering up and down the streets of the theater district and saying, oh, well, here's a show called Pearly Victorious, and there are seats available for the matinee in the balcony for $3. I'm going to see that show. And then I didn't have to discuss it with anybody at intermission. I've always enjoyed that aspect of it, although I like going with other people and talking about the theater as I'm talking about it with you now. But there's a part of me that's always really appreciated this is just me inside my head having an experience. And the theater did that for me to some degree, because it isn't, right? It's a very social experience for the people on stage. They're telling a story. They hate each other. They love each other. They're fighting with each other. But I just had to sit there and let it be in my head.
And as a 13-year-old too, I think that's a very emotionally impressionable time.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have a lot of friends in school. I wasn't very good at socializing, but I liked being by myself.
Well then, okay. Would you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert? Because like introverts to me are basically kind of, I'm generalizing here, so I realize this, but a lot of introverts don't want to go out. They like to stay in. But you're saying you like to go out, but you like to be by yourself when you're out.
Yeah.
So you're like looking back at, have you ever? I mean, I guess, have you ever taken a personality test, and so have you figured out like sort of where you are on that spectrum?
No, but I know myself, I think, well enough that I am fundamentally an introvert, but I'm also fundamentally very insecure about being an extrovert. And this is partly because I can't remember anyone's name, and I'm not even very good at remembering faces. And I'm continually in a state of thinking something is going to embarrass me at any moment. So part of the introversion, I think, is a kind of hiding. But it doesn't make me unhappy when I'm doing it. It makes me quite content. But I do know that there's a fear factor.
Interesting. You feel like you're going to be embarrassed at any moment. That's a level of anxiety as an extrovert I do not understand. I do not get that. So growing up then, did you find the scriptedness, the knowing what was coming next of theater, of musical theater, was that part of what you really fell in love with or drew you to it professionally? I'm trying to get into the psyche of all of this.
Yes, I'm not sure I know how to answer that. When you're young, you go to the theater or the movies or any entertainment form, and you see actors, and you think, oh, well, that's what that form is. It's actors. So I guess I want to be an actor. And I wasn't a particularly talented actor, although I did very well in high school. But by the time I got to college, it was clear that there were people who were much more talented than me. I think the notion of somehow being part of that cabal in a show without being an actor, being backstage, being someone who's just helping it happen, helping create it in one way or another was very, very attractive to me. And it's basically how I spent my career. I mean, I've been the generating creator of a couple of shows, including one that we just closed a couple of days ago in Phoenix called Let the Good Times Roll, which we'll probably see a workshop in the spring. But most of my career, I've been either a dramaturg or a creative consultant or a person who goes out and looks at shows and says to his boss, book that one, don't book that one. I've not been really in a driver's seat and haven't wanted to be in a driver's seat until very recently in my career. I think when I became, and this is a whole other subject, when I became the artistic director of Encores, the Encore series at City Center, which was in 2000, and my first season was in 2001. That's the first time I really was like the boss of something. And I got to like it, not immediately, but I got to like it a lot by about the third year.
Well, being the boss, then you're the one who takes the responsibility if something goes wrong. I think that's
correct. Yeah.
So I think that's probably why you didn't want to be the boss at first, and then you got this confidence. You're like, yeah, I could do this, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And,
So
sometimes you are responsible for theatrical calamity. I mean, and that also the fact that you work for, 15 years someplace. I ended up working for 30 years at Hugh Jampson, and you have your share of calamities. You learn that that's not. It was a very funny moment when we did a show that closed in previews, which was a show I had advocated for doing.
Face
And Rocco
value.
Landisman, who was my boss,
face
said to
value,
me the
right?
next morning, "Well, you have to kill yourself." And I really appreciate it because what he meant, of course, was you don't have to kill yourself. Rocco's a big horse racing fanatic, so he knows you go to a racetrack. There's 9 races. You're not going to win all 9 races. You'd be lucky if you win 1 race, or 2 races. So you just have to let that be part of your life. You have to let failure be part of your life, and that was very hard for me at the beginning. And I still don't like it, but I understand that it goes with the territory.
Well, that show's called Face Value. It closed after 8 previews, right? Yes. And how early in your career was that? Because you have 37 Broadway credits listed,
Yeah.
and they date all the way back to 1987. But I think Face Value was 93. Do I have my trivia
That would
right?
make sense. The first really important play that we did when I got to Hugh Jampson was M. Butterfly, and Face Value was David Huang's next script after M. Butterfly. And I think all of us who had done very well, I mean, I hadn't made any personal money, but the theater did very well, and the producers did very well, and the show won the Tony Award. Felt if David had a new script, and Stuart Ostro, who had been the lead producer of M. Butterfly, was the lead producer of Face Value, we need to be part of this. And it's funny how when you feel that way, you can work up enthusiasm for something that perhaps you should have worked up less enthusiasm for. So then, you go crashing forward, and pretty soon out come the tanks with guns blazing.
That's interesting. As a creative team, as someone like on the decision-making team of we need to greenlight this, or setting the rules. What are the ticket prices? How, if we're going to renovate the theater, everything that's going to happen to move a show in, right? So when do you ultimately, and is this experience, or were you taught this? I mean, how did you figure this out? Like, how do you figure out when to read the writing on the wall, or how to read the writing on the wall of this just isn't going to work?
Experience mainly, and of course, sometimes you can convince yourself that something's going to work, and then an audience convinces you that it's not going to work. In the case of Face Value, we had spent 3 weeks in Boston or 4 weeks in Boston trying out, and it was clear that it was not going to work. But Stuart really wanted to bring it in, and we had already booked the Court Theater, which is not even a Hugh Jampson theater now, the James Earl Jones, and in we came.
Is there something that you expected not to do well that turned out to be a massive success of any kind?
Well, there's something I expected not to do well that did well. I wouldn't say a massive success, but we went into Grand Hotel very reluctantly because I had looked at the material and said to Rocco, this is not very good material. I mean, this is just very, very routine level of writing. And he said quite smartly, it's Tommy Tune, and that's what I trust about it. And so we're doing it. So I think we put $1 million into it in the days when a show cost, $5 million, not $20 million.
Yeah.
And of course, we were both right? They fired all the writers out of town, brought in better writers, and the show turned out significantly better than it read on paper, partly because it was written by different people by the time it came into New York. But that was a nice surprise.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick commercial break. All right, everyone, now we're back. So one does not just become the senior vice president and creative director of a theater, a massive theater powerhouse. Like, how did you start getting into the dramaturg sort of scene? And then what led you to Hugh Jampson, or how did Hugh Jampson notice you?
I was my first job in the theater, real professional job in the theater, was as a critic. And I was a critic for the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, which was the afternoon paper in Los Angeles, a very unsuccessful Hearst newspaper. The LA Times was obviously the dominant paper. They hired me because I had been writing freelance criticism for a free newspaper for $35 a review, and their critic retired, and so they hired me. And that was really fun. I loved being a critic for about 5 years. And then around the 6th year, they made me the arts editor of the paper. And I quickly realized that I was in the wrong business. That if I did really well, they'd make me a city editor or something. But I had no interest in the journalism business. I was only a theater critic because of the theater, not because of journalism. And so I managed to get myself hired by the Mark Taper Forum, which is the big not-for-profit theater in LA, as the dramaturg, which was a term I didn't understand. The only thing I knew was that their dramaturg had left to go be the artistic director of the Repertory Theater of St. Louis. So they were without a dramaturg. So I said, I could do that. I had no idea what the job description would be. And I knew Gordon Davidson, who was the artistic director, because I kept panning the shows there. And little by little, I talked him into hiring me. So that was my first dramaturgical job. And we sort of invented what it would be as we went along.
But did he ever hold it against you? If you were like, you keep writing crap about my shows.
He did at one lunch right before he actually hired me. He said, why should I hire you? You write all these terrible things about my shows. And I said to him, well, I'm only trying to assess them and possibly make them better the next time someone does them. Or, it's just my feeling about it. And I think I didn't say this, but he said, well, you're smart. I mean, I don't agree with you a lot of the time, but what you say is not stupid, or vindictive. And he eventually hired me. And we got along extremely well for the 2 years I was there. And then Rocco hired me to come to New York.
Well, that was where I want to take this next, actually, the vindictiveness of how I feel a lot of reviews are written now, a lot of criticism. I don't feel like it's very constructive. I read a lot of these, and it sounds personal a lot of times.
I think it has gotten very personal, but I think all journalism and writing has gotten very personal. The notion that basically as a critic for a daily newspaper, not or a daily source of some sort, not necessarily for the New Yorker or for some, thoughtful essays about a particular play or playwright, but overnight reviews, the best of them, I think, long, long time ago by people like Walter Kerr and Brooks Atkinson were that they were good reporting.
Mm-hmm.
They told you what kind of a night it was and what kind of a show it was. And they didn't draw judgments about this kind of show shouldn't be done or should be done, or I'm insulted that they think I should sit through this. They said, this is a mystery thriller and it's a pretty good one. Kind of falls apart in the third act. They were just doing a reportorial job with an opinion behind it. And they could be mean. Well, I don't think Atkinson could be mean particularly. Kerr could be mean.
Why do you think that? Well, should they do this? Does this happen? And I just don't know about it. But when a show is getting put together, you workshop it, you do staged readings, you do all these different iterations to try to refine it. Do critics get brought in under any kind of NDA early on, or is that really what a dramaturg is supposed to be doing?
I think that's what the dramaturg is supposed to be doing. But way back in I'm so old that I have all this information that no one remembers or cares about. But way back in the day, when you went to Boston, Elliot Norton, who was the chief critic out there for either the Globe or whatever the leading paper was, I guess it was the Boston Globe, was full of suggestions and very helpful. And some of the suggestions were really wrong-headed. But he felt his mission, since the show was trying out and changes were still being made, was to say, this would be better if X or Y.
Right.
And I think producers looked to him for that. There was no such thing as a dramaturg in those days. We're talking about the 50s and 60s. But I think that was considered an out-of-town critic's prerogative. In town, the show is as finished as it's going to get. And it is what it is. I mean, through the 50s, there were certain shows that actually made changes after they opened, like Damn Yankees, but not many. Mainly what you saw was what you got.
Right.
And so the critic was saying, well, I went out last night and I saw this show and it's got good music. I really like the music and I wish the plot was stronger, or whatever they said. And that was fine. I mean, it wasn't, on the one hand, they were much more powerful than they are now because there was no other form of marketing really. But on the other hand, they weren't nearly as definitively cranky as they are now.
Cranky's a good word for it. I feel like there's a lot of crankiness going on, of just being angry that they were forced to sit through yet another show that they just don't like.
That's right. And they know going in that they're not going to like.
Right. And that's actually one of my favorite things is to expect a show to just kind of fall flat, not in a not an I want it to fail, but I'm like, this concept is so off the wall that how could it work? And then it turns into something like Come From Away is one of my favorite examples of this.
Right.
When I hear like, oh, they're writing a musical about 9/11. What? That's going to be, it's in terrible taste. No one should do it. And it's one of my favorite shows ever.
Yeah. Well,
right.
There have been some of those, no question about it.
Well, then,
I mean, I think the professional world thought MJ was like a disgraceful idea. How can you write a laudatory musical about this real life person who was not a good person? How long has it been running now? Like 6 years or something?
Yeah, you're right. It keeps going, and it doesn't need the advertising. It just keeps going because the tickets are there. Yeah. The time you spent, I guess, going through the multiple phases at Jujamcyn, like what phases did you have before getting to, the ultimate senior vice president and creative director?
Well, the original mission was, this is in 1987 when I arrived, that Broadway was in a rut. There were lots of empty theaters. There were not that many full theaters. And Rocco Landesman had perceived quite correctly, I think, that the Schubert organization and the Niederlander organization really had strong ties to most of the important English producers and creators, right? Whether it was Andrew Lloyd Webber or Cameron McIntosh or Tom Stoppard or, any of those people, and whether it was Amadeus or Katz or whatever, they had those relationships and they were long-standing relationships. And he felt that there was absolutely no upside to going to war over shows like that with organizations that were much bigger and more powerful than you were. That would just be a stupid thing to do. But our theaters were empty. So he said, well, we're going to have to make our own, we're going to have to roll our own here. And so, I think I said, what's really missing from that whole equation is American artists. Where are the openings for the David Huangs and the Wendy Wassersteins and there was a whole bunch of really talented people writing plays, including August Wilson, who had a show at Niederlander and 2 with Schubert, but both organizations had decided they'd sort of gave it the office. And we went and we just said, we're going to do them all. He's writing 10 plays. We're going to do all the rest of them.
Yeah. The century cycle.
And that was the plan. And then, if there was an empty theater and somebody needed to book a theater with something that we didn't really care about, we would book it because you want to have a full theater. But mostly that was the idea, was that we were going to invent our own with mostly American talent and a particular interest of mine with non-white talent where we could. We also did, some of the first gay plays on Broadway, Love, Valor, Compassion and Take Me Out and those. So I was looking to create opportunity where there wasn't opportunity, but I was also looking to fill the theaters. So, and that meant both picking and also working on plays as they came along, or courting either independent producers like Margot Lyon, who had this crazy idea to make a musical about Jelly Roll Morton. We dove into that, and then working on the shows as they were developing. And then at a certain point, Broadway really turned around, partly because of Disney, partly because of the mallizing of Times Square, making it a very safe tourist zone. And the man who owned Jujamcyn, Jim Binger in Minneapolis, said, stop investing in all these shows that you're inventing. This is ridiculous. We can now do what we couldn't do before. We can rent the theaters. So at that point, I became more or less a tout. I would go around the country and, as I said, say, book Tommy, don't book nameless musical that died in Wichita. And then Rocco eventually became head of the National Endowment for the Arts. He sold the company to Jordan Roth. And Jordan Roth really didn't want me even picking. He wanted me there as a more of a dramaturg more than anything else. And that's when I gained the title senior vice president. But yeah, I was fine with it, but it wasn't my idea. I mean, he bumped Paul Libin and me up to 2 different positions that had not existed before.
That's fascinating how seemingly, I know you probably work with tons of people and had teams that are helping you, but you mentioned you and 1 or 2 other people that are like, I want to attribute a lot of the revitalization of Broadway with the help of, Disney working with the city to clean up Times Square, then you're the one who's leading this charge to go out and say, we need diversity, we need different stories, we need original things, we need new. And now it's led down this path of where we are now. Of course, in the multiverse, there's all sorts of different variations of what's happened. But where we are now in this universe is a world where, like everything I listed off in your bio in the beginning that you helped usher through to Broadway is something that has changed the landscape of Broadway and influenced others and impacted others in ways that, probably I don't know if you've heard audience feedback from all these shows about how they've, people like find salvation in a lot of these stories.
I guess. I mean, I I want people to have an emotional experience with what's on stage. And and yes, it's wonderful if someone says this particular play changed my life. A couple of people said that to me about The Prom, which was a show that I sort of invented out of whole cloth and then didn't write, but I get a nice credit on it. And that's wonderful when that happens. But mainly, I think people who go to the theater are happy when they've had an actual emotional experience with what they've seen. It doesn't have to change their life. It has to give them something that a good book or a good movie or a good symphony gives them, some real feeling inside of them. And that's what you strive for. I
heard a story told by Izzy Vical and Caitlin Kinnunen from The Prom multiple times that they, when they were doing their out of town, it was in Atlanta, right? So it's in the South. You're doing this show about lesbian teens in the South, and somebody came up to them. I think it was the stage door. I could be butchering the story. Sorry if I am. But someone came up to them, and it was this kind of gruff man, and was like, "If I had known what this show was about, I would have never come to see it. ... But I'm so glad that I did. It's truly changed how I feel about a lot of things."
That's good.
Right.
That's a good thing when that happens.
Right. And that's the kind of thing that by just bringing stories to the stage in a safe space where people might show up because they're somebody's plus one or they're taking their kids or whatever, all of a sudden, like, you're teaching multi-generations how to think and empathize in a way that they probably wouldn't have otherwise.
When that happens, it's a really good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then, getting into the business of show business today, I've been talking with so many people, and I personally think that Broadway is kind of on a very slow death because production costs keep going up while ticket sales are going down. Post-COVID, it's not back to where it was pre-COVID. It's like the only way to have success, I'll put in air quotes, in the U.S. West End is different. But in the U.S. is to have this massive commercial hit where you have to go big or go home. And now I don't see anything that's really an original story anymore because you have to have IP that people know of. So there's brand recognition for them to want to spend an astronomical amount of money on a ticket for a show they haven't seen.
I think that's mostly true. I think maybe Happy Ending gives a lie to that to some degree.
That's exactly what I have said that's different. And they barely made it to opening. Right? Because their ticket sales were so bad, because they were an original IP, then they finally made it to opening, then word of mouth, then Tony Awards, then. But that's a Cinderella story.
Harder to do now than it's ever been before, I think.
Exactly.
But not impossible, as we now know from at least one show. And I have to say, I think there are others that, while they have some recognition, like Buena Vista Social Club, huge brand names like George Clooney, and they manage. But I do agree that this is a big problem, and it partly has to do with the whole nature of marketing, in that you market what's the most marketable thing about your show, which is not necessarily that people like it, but that it has a famous title or a famous actor or something. Mm-hmm. And partly it's a function of cost. I mean, it costs a lot of money to buy a ticket, and it costs a lot of money to put on the show. What I don't believe is that we're in a death spiral. I mean, Broadway's been in a death spiral since the Greeks, and something will happen to change it. And I don't know what. I have no idea what, but I've seen it change in any number of ways, any number of times in my very significantly long lifetime. And I believe it will survive. I mean, one of the problems that you didn't mention that I think was a big problem this summer is the lack of tourists.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that the United States has scared off a lot of tourists, and those are the people who buy tickets in the summer. And the summer went from being a dead time in the 70s and 80s to being a really good time. And I think this summer was a rude shock that it was deader than anyone expected.
I haven't been paying attention to that part in the last month, but that makes a lot of sense. And that's partially what I meant by we're not where we were pre-pandemic. I meant in terms of audience attendance.
Yeah, we're not.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. But how would you wave a magic wand and fix it? I would start with city subsidized tickets and caps on the amount that theaters can charge productions.
I don't think you can do that. But
I know you can't now. This is magic wand.
Oh, the magic wand. Oh, yeah. I had one, but I left it in my other suit to the cleaners. I think that, one of the misperceptions, and this would be one thing I would really fight hard to do. One of the misperceptions is that it cost $900 to see George Clooney, but it didn't. There were people paying $900 to see George Clooney, but if you looked at the average ticket price for that show in any given week, it was probably between $250 and $280. I mean, people weren't sitting in premium $900 seats, but they were there. And while that seems like an awful lot of money, it's an amount that a lot more people can pay than $900. So this sense that, if you want to see a movie star, it's going to cost you almost $1,000 needs to be countered with some kind of marketing about ticket pricing. And of course, no one wants to do that because then you discourage people from paying $900 when they know they could actually pay $250. And so, okay, they're sitting in the mezzanine. It's not the end of the world. So it's a push me, pull you, but I do think it's a bad perception mistake that theater tickets are not just expensive. They're astronomical. They're not astronomical.
They're not astronomical. And then you have people like, the lottery systems, the people using the lottery systems and student rush tickets. Yeah. And there's ways to have
group
accessible
sales.
There's ways to have accessible things. But I think, a lot of what we hear is maybe it is the marketing. Cause I think the $900 ticket I always attributed it to Othello. So it's Jake Gyllenhaal.
Well, okay.
You're right.
Like, name your poison.
Yeah. Name your celebrity. But I could go see the same people on the West End. I'm being rough transition here, but on the West End for like £90 and sit in the equivalent of the orchestra over there, right? So that's what I mean about the costs. If the city were to support the arts in the way they do there, I think it would be a much different ecosystem.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been much government support, city, state, or federal, for commercial arts. Mm-hmm. I mean, as far as the government is concerned, this is a business like any other business. And, it's up to you. How much gasoline can you sell in a week? Which is really unfortunate and very not unique, unusual, I think, among liberal democracies, which is what we had up until recently. Most of the European countries do support the arts, and it's made a huge difference. And I think what people get out of the arts is productive for the rest of the economy, where that's been shown over and over and over again. But it has not convinced the government to do anything about it, really.
No.
In any significant way.
No, and that's where I would wave my magic wand. Yeah. Would just say, like, let's have the city subsidize it, and because theater owners, I feel like from a production perspective, the theater owners are the only ones who make a ton of money on everything, no matter what, because there's always somebody in the space. There are more shows than we have theaters right now. So they're always making money on licensing fees and the rental of the theater and paying their staff when a show is there, right? Like the show pays for everything to use in that space.
Right.
And then that has to be passed on through the ticket cost, including your celebrities' astronomical salaries.
Right.
Passed on through the ticket cost to the average consumer, the average theater consumer.
I think you'd have to see more systemic failure before anybody really takes the bull by the horns. Right now,
it's coming. I think it's coming.
It may be coming, but it hasn't arrived.
No.
Yeah, the people are concerned, and they wish musicals didn't cost $25 million, and why do they? But I think if you started to see real systemic failure, lots and lots of empty theaters, nobody buying tickets, you might actually get some kind of action. But boy, the theater community and show business in general, very slow to respond.
Oh, it's terrible.
They don't get ahead of these things.
Mm-mm. No, I say this too, is that theater is the last industry. Broadway is one of the last industries to adopt any new change, especially technological.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, in 1968, I happen to know this just from reading William Goldman's book, there was one show that accepted credit cards for tickets. Everyone else, and the one show ran about 2 weeks. There was no, I mean, credit cards had been in business for a long time.
Right.
And you couldn't use one at the box office. The whole notion of how you purchase tickets and related to that, the fee process and, you know, what it costs to buy a ticket beyond the price of the ticket.
Yep.
I mean, it's not good.
This is what I mean. Something's got to break.
Yeah.
This is the slow death. Strangulation.
There's slow decline. I don't believe there's death. I believe there's decline and comeback.
You're right.
That's been my experience for my whole life.
A slow decline. You're right, because it won't die. There's always going to be people performing somewhere.
And there's always people who want to see them.
Yep. Yeah. So a slow chokehold on the industry here in Broadway, at least, and then I guess regionally in the country too. I mean, it was bad post-COVID, and now, it's just not good. Current administration.
I don't know what the touring world is like these days. I haven't paid any attention.
I don't know, and I need to find out more information about this. So if anybody's listening knows, let me know. But I think I saw that the second to last tour stop of the Beetlejuice tour was canceled due to low ticket sales. I don't know what happened there, but anyway, I know The Outsiders, which I worked on, is about to launch a tour that's booked for 2 years. I mean, I guess it could go out and find out that there's nobody sitting there and not run for 2 years, but that's a healthy tour. That's got a different demographic though. That's
true.
That is aimed at the younger generation who needs to suck onto Broadway and start creating the new hits. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So that's why I love shows like The Outsiders, and not put aside the fact that it's not truly an original IP, right? It's an adaptation from a book and a movie. But the fact that it is aimed at and embraces the fact that its fans are all of much younger demographic that don't have a lot of money to spend on front row seats, right? A 2-year tour, I think, is brilliant because you're going to be able to go out to these 4,500 seat houses. Yeah. 4,000, 5,000 seat houses that cost a fourth of what it would cost to get in a mezzanine here in New York. Yeah. So you're going to start influencing exponentially all of these people all over the world. I think it's
and that's the other thing about touring is people see the tour and then weirdly enough, they don't feel they've seen the show. That makes them want to come see the show in New York.
Right. Which is backwards.
Which is backwards, yes.
Which is backwards. Yeah, right. So that's what I loved about The Wiz. I was a co-producer on The Wiz, and and part of why I did that was like, they're going to go on tour before the Broadway show.
Right. And then go back on tour.
And then they're back on tour again. But they could already do that because it was already an IP people knew. It was already property people knew, a story. Right. And you just can't do that because we're not a culture of going to see shows we've never heard of before and spending a lot of money on it. You got to hopefully raise enough money because you have a good enough cast and creatives behind it to get to opening, to then have enough money to market, to make it to Tony's, to hopefully win some awards that then get you notoriety, and then you start touring, and then hopefully you make your money back. It's a terrible model. It's terrible.
It's not a great. It's not that model is not a great model.
No, and it's not like that in other countries.
No, although I don't, West End is a real exception, but most countries don't have a Broadway.
No, I'm not saying
they don't have an equivalent business. They have, state-sponsored theaters that do shows for short runs that then come back every year for 6 more weeks, and it's a whole different way of doing things. And Broadway may slide in some ways into that direction, but not tomorrow.
I mean, right, and that's to my point. State-sponsored, right? Like when you have the entity that is governing the people, promoting the arts. I don't know. I'm just on a soapbox right now, and I get passionate about the fact that you pay tomorrow's marketing budget with yesterday's ticket sales, and it's this catch-22 and something in the cycle has to break and change and get better.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I'm with you.
we're going to take a quick break for a few commercials. All right, everyone, welcome back to the episode. So let's wrap up here. We'll wind down a little bit with Plot in 60 Seconds. It's a game I play with everybody here on the podcast. I'm going to put 60 seconds up on the screen, and you're going to give me a number 1 through 17. Pick a number off of list 1 through 17. It'll correspond to a musical that I have on my list, and then you have 60 seconds to give me plot. Give me the plot to the musical you just chose.
Let's start with number 10.
Number 10 is The Lion King. Go.
60
The Lion
seconds
King
remaining.
is a show about a little baby lion who grows up to be a great big lion and it's basically Hamlet, has to conquer his uncle who killed his father, or at least that's the plot of Hamlet.
and we're done.
5 seconds remaining.
Okay, I'll take it.
That's about as much as you're going to get from me out of almost anything. You know?
And there's some songs in Hakuna Matata. And okay. 3 closing questions I ask everyone to wrap up. The first one simply is just what motivates you.
Oh, you mean I don't have to do all 17?
No, you don't. No. First one simply is just what motivates you.
I think what motivates me is the desire to see audiences impacted by the theater.
I love that. All right. What advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
Advice to my younger self would be not to be so shy and to toot your own horn a little bit more than I did, within reason, and not become obnoxious about it. But I was, again, it's all about introversion. I was waiting for the phone to ring when I probably should have been picking up the phone and calling people. And to young people, I've always said the same thing, because it worked for me, which is take any job. You want to be in the theater? Take any job that you're being offered. You'll meet people, maybe in an area that you have absolutely no interest in. You don't care about advertising or marketing or dramaturgy or take any job. That's how you will begin to connect, and it can be a very weird set of dots that connect.
All right. And then last question, if you can only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Follies.
Oh, that's one that you helped create?
No, I was in college when Follies was produced.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't have my timeline right. You're such a young man. I would.
That's my favorite show.
That's great. All right. Where can we find you online? And where do you play the social media games?
Well, the book is at JJ. The book that we were talking about earlier is at jjviertel.com. There's 2 J's because my son is named Josh and I'm named Jack.
I was wondering if that was
jjviertel.com. I also have my own site, which is jackviertel.com.
Yeah.
And I'm on most of the sites that you would be on, Blue Sky and Instagram and Facebook, and you can find me under my name.
Cool.
I don't post all that often, although I'm posting about this book somewhat regularly now because that's what my publisher has told me to do.
Good publisher.
And I do whatever I'm told.
Yeah, so everybody, The Glass Eel is out now, so find that wherever you find books, in hard copy or digital, and find Jack online. I am at theater_podcast on Threads, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm on Facebook. Leave a rating, leave a review if you're listening on a platform like Apple or Spotify that does that. Thanks to Jukebox the Ghost for the intro and outro music. And Jack, thank you so much. I've had a really good time chatting with you.
Thank you for having me. I've had a really good time too.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.